I'm Julie Kohler, host of the White Picket Fence podcast. If you've read the opinion section of any newspaper lately, you've probably come across think pieces, panicking about falling marriage rates. They make sweeping claims that getting married will make you happier, healthier, and wealthier. Some even say that getting married is a way to stick it to the elites. I'm not so sure about that. This season on White Picket Fence, we're examining the current marriage panic. We'll go beyond the rosy sheen of love and commitment and expose the darker side to all of this marriage talk and explore what becomes possible when we broaden our imagination around what relationships can look like. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back, everyone. This is A'shanti Gholar, the host of the Brown Girl's Guide to Politics, and welcome to Season 6. We are excited to have you back with us, and we are also very excited about today's special guest, our first repeat guest, Alexis McGill Johnson, who is the CEO of Planned Parenthood Federation of America. And for those of you who don't know, Planned Parenthood is a nonprofit organization that provides sexual health care in the United States and globally. Alexis, how are you?
Oh, I'm wonderful. How are you, A'shanti? It's so good to see you again.
It's so good to see you. And I love the fact that you are our first repeat guest. You're one of my favorite people. I know I was super ecstatic when they named you the permanent CEO of Planned Parenthood, because in my mind, I was like, well, was there any other choice? I obviously can't tweet that. That's what I'm thinking. So I'm just going to tweet my congratulations. So congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. I didn't think it was going to feel as different to become permanent, like when somebody actually puts a ring on it. But it when you're just living together for a long time and then you're like, but I felt so honored and humbled that the organization and the boards would put that kind of faith in me to carry us forward.
Well, the perfect choice, well-deserved. 2020 was quite the year, as we know, and 2021 is already giving 2020 a run for its money. So I do have to get your thoughts on the insurrection at the Capitol, because the fact is it was an insurrection. And when you and I had our first chat, just our first girlfriend chat, first leading organizations chat, we talked a lot about what was going on in the country, particularly racially, and how the Trump administration, was fueling a lot of things. How are you feeling about everything that has happened?
It was devastating. And when you actually think about the day of January 6th, for most of us, particularly, I know you were, as I was, like up all night watching the returns for the Georgia Senate race and trying to just hold on to that last shred of hope. As you said, 2020 just tried its level best to get rid of. And like Reverend Warnock said, Psalm 35, joy comes in the morning, right? Joy will come in the morning. Yes. And it did. By midday, to watch that just full-throated, unapologetic demonstration of white supremacy and anti-democracy and the weaponization of racial anxiety over and over again. And you think about just like when they said win at all costs, this is what they meant. Right? Yes. That they were really willing to destroy democracy, to destroy the integrity and the belief in that just really underscores everything that America is, right? We are at best, we are a nation state because we are an imagined community, right? We have to bind ourselves together with these notions. And, while so many, particularly Black women, have been on the front line trying to claw our way into democracy, right? Yes. Like foot in the door, like we are not going to let this door of democracy close on us. They were there trying to destroy it. And so it's a wound, to know after the November election that half of America still supports a misogynistic, patriarchal racist, pig. And then at the same time that they are so willing to fight for that last gasp, that it is just terrifying.
I agree with you. And I was talking to someone and they're like, where do you think this came from? And I said, this has really been building since 2008 when we had the audacity to elect a Black man as president. We saw the rise of the Tea Party. We saw the rise of birtherism. And 2016 was very much about keeping our country for the people that we think it is for. I wasn't surprised how close the election was. I would tell people all the time, I'm like, this thing is virtually tied. I felt in my heart we could eke it out, and we did. I'm very excited about Georgia. I was telling people, I have lots of friends who are down there running things, and they are extremely talented and good. So I think that they can eke this out. But it stays in my mind that 70 million of our fellow Americans were 100% fine with the direction that the country was going in. But we have a new president. We have a new vice president. We got a brown girl in the White House. What are your feelings about the Biden-Harris administration?
I mean, first of all, just how exciting it is. Like you just don't really know how much representation matters until you see it in all of its pomp and circumstance, and the pride that you feel, your heart swelling just looking at Vice President Kamala Harris take the stage just as a brown girl. We've seen President Biden on stage before, but Vice President Harris we haven't. And so that's just a moment to exhale and pause and just revel in it. And the excitement around it isn't just about the representation from a symbolic standpoint, but substantively, we just know she is going to bring it, right? We know that what we've already seen from this administration, the ways in which they've configured the cabinet, the White House personnel, to your friend, some of your friends and our friends together.
Yes. So excited for our friends. Gonna be running things.
They're the truth, right? I mean, none of it is siloed, right? It is, even though there is a focus on racial equity, it is also embedded in the Domestic Policy Council, right? Even though there's a focus on gender, we see it embodied throughout, every cabinet. And so just the notion of how to bring to bear not just an intersectional framework, but actually turn that intersectionality into policy making is just so exciting.
I mean, it's going to be wonderful. I'm very excited about Deb Haaland, who will be our first Indigenous cabinet secretary. I mean, perfect person. Excited about Neera Tanden. Excited about Congresswoman Marcia Fudge.
Vanita Gupta, Justice.
I know.
Javier Becerra. I feel like it's a little I feel like Parliament Chocolate City coming in. We got the Minister of Finance.
I love it. And just the fact that we know these are great people, they're wonderful public servants. I know I'm just going to be sleeping so much better at night knowing that these are the people who are going to be running our country, and they have a huge task ahead of them.
Absolutely.
I mean, we know we got 4 years. There's a lot to be done, and it's going to be a heavy lift. And I want to switch to an amazing article that you wrote. I saw it on your Twitter account, and you shared your 2021 resolutions. And I want to go through it and talk about some of the things that relate to your work at Planned Parenthood. But there are also some things there that were really personal. And for me, it reminded me, this is why I love Alexis, is this wasn't just talking about your work, but you were also speaking to women, to people in general, about taking it easy on ourselves, because we've gone through a lot over the past 4 years. We're still in the middle of a pandemic. We just saw another attack on democracy fueled by racism. So there's a lot.
It's a lot.
But starting with your resolutions, you really said we do have to hold the Biden-Harris administration accountable on sexual and reproductive health. So what are some of the immediate things that Planned Parenthood would like to see from the administration?
I think the notion of having a very strong outside game to complement the very strong inside leadership, I think first and foremost is something really that we should highlight. The work that Planned Parenthood has done in concert with 90 organizations in the reproductive health, rights, and justice field to come together around a blueprint agenda so that we would be ready on day one. As long as they were ready on day one, I think is really important. Your point about the last 4 years having been so horrible, including the last couple of weeks on the Supreme Court ruling on REMS, is that we do have to undo the harm from the last 4 years. Like that is a lot of work. But what the Biden-Harris administration has shown us throughout their campaigning and conversation is that they are willing to move, right? They are willing to learn and move and understand how these policies actually impact real people and connect the dots to the lived experience. And so we're looking to make sure that this administration's commitment to sexual and reproductive health care is demonstrated by eliminating the global gag rule, right? We should not be telling other countries, who need aid, what their policies should be around abortion. We want to start the process of rolling back the harmful policies like the Title X domestic gag rule, right? We need to make it easier to expand access to family planning. And I think we have an opportunity not only to restore Title X, but also build it back better and modernize it in all of the ways in which, the Biden-Harris administration is thinking. And, we do need to ask the incoming administration or current administration to keep medication abortion easier to access, particularly during the pandemic, and to reduce those restrictions. And so, those are just some of the beginning conversations that we have had. But, we are committing to work with this administration on a long-term fight, to also make sure, I guess, that we are repealing the Hyde and Helms amendments or eliminating them altogether, which they can do just in the ways in which they write their budgets. And so it's exciting to have congressional majorities in both houses and the White House and have started those conversations around why it's so important to repeal discriminatory laws and bans, and why it is so important for us to show up in a full-throated way in support of sexual and reproductive health care.
Absolutely. And also in the article, you just mentioned the Hyde Amendment. You called for the repeal of the Hyde Amendment. And can you tell our listeners just exactly why this is bad for women of color? Because when we hear it talked about a lot, particularly by Congresswomen of color, they say this is so harmful for women of color. So can you elaborate a little bit on that for the listeners?
Yeah, of course. Look, the Hyde Amendment restricts people who depend on Medicaid, essentially, or federal programs for health care from getting access or using their health insurance to access safe and legal abortion. So we're talking about people with low incomes. We're talking about largely women of color, young people, transgender, non-binary people, a policy that disproportionately impacts in that way is just racist, right? It's beyond discriminatory. It's actually racist. And I think when you see, and I would love your listeners to look up the amazing conversation and speech that Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, another brown girl, gave, tying together the twin pandemic of 2020 into 2021, right? Of COVID and the race reckoning and the disproportionate impact on people of color. And so I just think that finding ways to eliminate Hyde, ensuring that people really understand what's at stake. Young people get it. They like almost 2/3 of young people support Medicaid coverage for abortion. And we know the majority of Americans actually support access to abortion in every state. There's no state, not even Georgia, that don't believe it should be the law of the land. And so we have to make sure our policies expand that access, and repealing Hyde or eliminating Hyde actually would be one of those ways to do that.
And talking about Georgia and the states, a little bit more about the work Planned Parenthood is going to be doing to make sure that women have their freedom around healthcare, sexual reproduction in the states, because just like the Supreme Court, we are seeing just so many states just, little bit here, a little bit there, just, tapping away at trying to just take us back.
Yes, no, absolutely. I mean, look, I think as excited as I am around our White House and our current Congress, it is still alarming that we have essentially a super majority on the other side of the Supreme Court, as well as the lasting legacy of the McConnell administration, pushing through all of those conservative judges. And so, the work that we need to do to, while Roe is certainly under threat, there are 18 cases that are literally one step away from the Supreme Court that will chip or harden those chips permanently in that law. And in every state that has been hostile to access to sexual and reproductive health care, there are people organizing around bans to continue to further erode freedom. And so what that means, right, if Roe falls or if they, lock into something that just is, basically makes Roe in name only across the board, is that there will be some states where if you make a decision to terminate your pregnancy, you will be able to do so without restriction and, supported to do that. And in other states, you'll be forced into pregnancy if you are not able to get the resources to travel out. That's something like 25 million women of reproductive age who are living in states that be hostile. And I think that is what we know won't happen is people won't stop trying to seek access to abortion, right? So like putting that undue burden, we've seen it obviously during COVID, people traveling through the pandemic just to get access to basic health care. And so we do have to do a lot of work to build an infrastructure to make sure that we are supporting people with our partners who are seeking access.
25 million. That is, wow.
Yeah.
That is a huge number.
Don't feel like sitting in a waiting room right now? Planned Parenthood's got you covered as a leader in using new technologies to provide high-quality healthcare in ways that fit your life. Through Planned Parenthood's virtual appointments, you can get high-quality, affordable care your way, by phone or video. Trusted providers will listen, give information, and support you in all of your healthcare decisions. Planned Parenthood's telehealth appointments are high quality, affordable, and private, just like in-person visits. Whether you need help with birth control, a prescription refill, or other sexual or reproductive care services, skip the waiting room and get the care you need when you need it. Planned Parenthood takes the stress out of healthcare and is ready when you are. Check out PlannedParenthood.com/telehealth to learn more and book a virtual appointment. That's PlannedParenthood.com/telehealth.
One of the things you also talked about in the article, your resolutions that spoke to me as a woman of color, also leading an organization, is centering racial equity. At Emerge, that's what we're doing, really centering equity and justice. And the catalyst for the Brown Girls Guide to go from the blog format to the podcast format was we did a series called Being the Only Brown Girl in the Room, where we talked about the struggles of being women of color in politics, sometimes being the only woman of color in your department, in your organization, and the reality that organizations have to face it as well, that no one's really immune to this. So tell us a little bit more about what you're going to be doing at Planned Parenthood around racial equity.
Yes, absolutely. And it is, as Black women, brown girls who led traditionally or formerly white-led organizations, it is a very unique space to be sitting in. I think that the work that we are doing is we've established a federation-wide commitment to addressing racial equity in our own ranks. And, part of that has been we're starting with a benchmarking survey around belonging and equity to make sure that we understand what we're actually solving for. We have a lot of really important information from our staff, from our patients that are telling us where we are getting it wrong. We need to get get under the really important stories that we know are real, and we know are true because we've lived them and experienced them ourselves. We need to understand kind of deeper how to connect dots and what are the right interventions for us. What are the gaps in what our knowledge is? How are we growing leaders? How are we, ensuring that we are, reducing our own blind spots and our racial anxiety, all of the things that we should just be doing from a technical standpoint. But really, it's a cultural shift, right? For me, it's about bringing equity, and the work that we're doing in equity as a broad framework into the office of the president, so that every decision that radiates out from my office into all of my leadership team has to match up to that equity framework and help us understand where are the trade-offs as we build, different work and making sure that we're making those right choices. And then, of course, it's accountability, right? It's like making sure that, we're also measuring ourselves, which is why I started with the benchmark, because I think that actually helps us, build out the right set of metrics to understand what the underlying drivers are around the inequity that we're seeing right now. So, I'm a research head. So I had to put together the plan that, felt authentic to me, but that I also know is grounded in literally how our brains and bodies process, race and gender identity and differences. And so that's kind of how we're leading. But the general piece of it is there's this moment right now, and I hope you feel it too, where I actually just feel quite free, whatever freedom looks like, because we do have to imagine it a little bit for ourselves because we've never really been free. But in a moment where the country, the world is being forced to grapple with racial equity and to be sitting in these seats knowing that, yes, now is not the time to be incremental. Now is the time to be bold and transformative and, do what we need to do.
I 100% agree with you. So last year, we did our equity and justice survey across our network. We did a presentation to everyone, and we were like, look, these are all the things that we have to work on. And it's just not a staff thing. It also has to be who are sitting on our boards, who's sitting on our cabinets. Are we really making this an inclusive experience for the women who are coming through our program? We know running for office is different for women, but it's also different for women of color. It's different for LGBTQ women with disabilities, making sure that we're taking in that broad spectrum. And especially for me to be the first Black woman leading the organization, how can I not do this work? Especially when I want more Black, Brown, Indigenous women of color in, I have to make sure they're also getting the experience that I would have wanted to had. So how am I making this good for them as well? So I can't wait for us to compare notes and see how we can continue to make our organizations better.
Absolutely.
And something else that you wrote that was really personal is to stop apologizing when you're parenting and when you're partnering. And for me, I love that. And I'm like, let me copy and paste this and send this to some of the team members, because we'll be on Zooms and, kids are running around and just being kids and they're always apologizing. And I'm like, stop. I say all the time, I'm like, please do not apologize. You're trying to work, you're homeschooling, the kids are hungry. We are all literally working where we live. So why was it important for you to say that not only to yourself, but to let the other moms, people with partners know, hey, this is our life right now. We need to stop apologizing for really just handling it and making it through.
Yes, you're essentially apologizing for being a mom or a partner or what, for just being you. And, as if it's unprofessional, as if sitting in your, at your desk Zooming, full time is actually the definition of professionalism anyway. We're all making a way out of a way. It particularly felt important for me to say, because the way communities get marginalized, it starts with ideas about it starts about ideas around hierarchy, right? Like, we value men for this, women for this. We value, communities of color differently than we value white communities. Like all of the ways in which the ideas have changed around equality. I think we all kind of feel like, of course, genders are equal. Of course, races are equal. Like those things are kind of basic and built in. We are working in organizations that are fighting for policies to make those ideals real every day, right? And so we understand that there's still work to do to make the ideals real. But long after you address the ideology and you address the kind of institutions, the laws, the practices that help us, there's a whole set of informal practices that keep that inequality alive, that inequity alive. And every time we apologize for saying, oh my God, my kid needs to eat, or, oh my God, I need to go to the bathroom, or please, I can't turn on my Zoom today because I didn't do my hair. We are replicating, practices that are, that ladder up to inequality in our values. And so we can't have one set of values and then acknowledge these informal practices as standard. They just don't go together. So I'm trying to get us to be more coherent and to focus on really addressing those.
Ooh, I love that. I love everything that you just said. And this has once again been a great interview with you, Alexis. So I do want to ask you, the first 4 years of the Biden-Harris administration are done. What is your hope for what they have been able to accomplish to make the world better around the work that Planned Parenthood does?
Oh my gosh, you are asking me. I just said I was free, and now you're asking me to dream about freedom. Look, first of all, 4 years from now, COVID is over.
Yes. Amen. We're claiming that.
That people are actually back out living safe and healthy and productive lives and not worried about being in a pandemic, but also understanding the impact of it, and that we have restored kind of and expanded access to healthcare. Hyde is gone, as I mentioned, so people have access, and that we have the support and the recognition that that sexual and reproductive healthcare is healthcare, that abortion is healthcare, and that it is funded at levels appropriate and consistent with how people need to access that care, and that we are doing that work, that it is done through a really strong equity lens, and not just racial equity, although that's obviously really important to us as brown girls, but there is a lot of geographic inequity that we need to address. We need to have better rural strategies for care, and I really hope that what we see in this current administration and cabinet, to have a Deb Haaland and, a Javier Becerra, like working together to talk about like what needs to happen in the interior, what needs to happen over here, and how race equity goes through it with our sister Susan Rice. I think all of that is what I hope to see. And then if I can just put one other possibility onto the table, is that together, after this last horrible 4 years of weaponizing racial and gender anxiety, that we have worked to create the conditions for, our sister or some other sister who is able to run and be seen as a viable candidate for holding the highest office in our land and in the world. So the next 4 years is tilling the soil and creating the conditions and making sure that we are doing what we need to do to secure freedom.
Thank you, Alexis, for joining us. Thank you for everything that you do. Thank you to everyone for listening. If you like this episode, please rate and review us wherever you listen to your podcast. And in between episodes, you can find the Brown Girls Guide to Politics at www.thebgguide.com and on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at The BG Guide. And the Brown Girls Guide to Politics podcast is produced by Wonder Media Network, and you can find them at wondermedianetwork.com. Until next time, Brown Girls.